Did you know that Rhode Island is home to a massive underwater canyon that drops hundreds of feet into the darkness? Or that its most famous islands are actually the mountaintops of a drowned glacial valley? From the singing sands of Block Island to the tectonic rifts hidden beneath the Narragansett Bay, the ocean state is a geological masterpiece of ice, salt, and stone. These are 50 Rhode Island geography facts you never knew. Fact 50. The Narragansett Bay Estuary. Narragansett Bay is the defining geographical feature of the state, but it isn't just a bay. It's a ria, a drowned river valley. Thousands of years ago, the Blackstone and Providence rivers flowed much further south across a dry plain. When the glaciers melted and sea levels rose, the Atlantic rushed in, flooding the valleys and turning the hills into the islands we see today. Fact 49. The fractal coastline. Despite its tiny landmass, Rhode Island has more than 400 miles of coastline. This is due to the fractal nature of its geography. Every cove, neck, and inlet creates a jagged edge that multiplies the state's contact with the sea. If you stretched its coastline into a straight line, it would reach from Providence all the way to Washington, D.C. Fact 48. The tectonic boundary. Rhode Island sits on the Avalonian terrain. Hundreds of millions of years ago, the land that's now Rhode Island was actually part of a microcontinent near the South Pole. It collided with North America, leaving behind a distinct geological seam that runs right through the center of the state. Fact 47. The Glacial Terminal Moraine. The southern coast of Rhode Island, from Watch Hill to Point Judith, is defined by the Charlestown Moraine. This is a massive dumping ground of boulders and debris left by the retreating Laurentide ice sheet 18,000 years ago. This ridge of debris is the only reason southern Rhode Island has hills and is literally a wall of glacial trash. Fact 46. The Saconnet River Paradox. The Saconnet River isn't a river at all. Geographically, it's a tidal strait. It's a narrow arm of the Atlantic Ocean that separates Aquidneck Island from the mainland. Because it has no significant freshwater source, its current is almost entirely dictated by the moon and the tides. Fact 45. The Mohegan Bluffs. On Block Island, the Mohegan Bluffs rise nearly 200 feet straight out of the Atlantic. These aren't made of solid rocks. They're composed of glacial till, clay, sand, and stones. Because they're soft, the Atlantic is eating them at a rate of nearly 3 feet per year, making this one of the most rapidly changing coastlines in New England. Fact 44. The Continental Shelf Gateway. Rhode Island is uniquely positioned at the edge of the continental shelf. South of Block Island, the ocean floor stays relatively shallow for miles before suddenly dropping off into the deep abyss. This shelf geography is why Rhode Island experiences such massive storm surges. The shallow water piles up the waves before they hit the coast. Fact 43. The singing sands of Block Island. Block Island's beaches are composed of high-frequency quartz grains. When the wind and moisture levels are perfect, the sand emits a singing or whistling sound when walked upon. This is a rare geographical acoustic phenomenon found only in a handful of places on Earth. Fact 42. The salt ponds, such as Ninigret and Quanacontog. These are coastal lagoons separated from the ocean by thin barrier beaches. They're the kidneys of the coast, filtering water and providing a unique brackish geography that exists nowhere else in the state. Fact 41. Whale Rock. In the middle of the West Passage of Narragansett Bay sits Whale Rock. During the Great Hurricane of 1938, a massive storm surge literally washed away the lighthouse that stood here, along with the rock's surface layers. It serves as a grim geographical marker of the ocean's power to edit the landscape in a single afternoon. Fact 40. Jeremoth Hill. The highest point in Rhode Island is Jeremoth Hill at 812 feet. While it is the lowest high point of almost any state, its geography is significant. It sits on the crystalline uplands, a plateau of ancient granite that resisted the glacier's attempts to grind it down. Fact 39. The Blackstone River Drop. The Blackstone River is one of the steepest rivers in the region for its length. It drops 438 feet over its 48-mile course. This geographical plunge created the powerful waterfalls that fueled the American Industrial Revolution, making a tiny spot in Rhode Island the geographical birthplace of modern industry. Fact 38. The Scituate Reservoir. Rhode Island has no large natural lakes, but it has the Scituate Reservoir. To create it, engineers flooded an entire valley, swallowing several villages. Geographically, it's now the largest body of fresh water in the state, essentially an artificial inland sea. Fact 37. The Cumberland Blue Stone. In the town of Cumberland, you can find Cumberlandite, a rare dark magnetic rock found nowhere else on the planet in such a concentrated mass. It's so iron-rich that it is twice as heavy as normal rock. It's a geological mystery that exists only in a tiny 4-acre patch of Rhode Island. Fact 36. The Purgatory Chasm. In Middletown, a massive vertical fissure in the rock known as Purgatory Chasm was created by the relentless pounding of the Atlantic. The ocean found a weak seam in the conglomerate rock and hollowed it out over thousands of years, creating a dramatic, narrow gorge where the sea roars during high tide. Fact 35. Aquidneck Island. The largest island in the state, Aquidneck, is actually a structural basin. It's shaped like a bowl, which is why the center of the island is relatively flat and fertile, while the edges are defined by rugged rocky cliffs. Fact 34. The Nubble Geography. Rhode Island's coast is dotted with nubbles, tiny rocky outcroppings that are only visible at low tide. These are the teeth of the Avalonian bedrock, and they have claimed more shipwrecks per mile than almost any other stretch of the New England coast. Fact 33. The Narragansett Lobe. During the Ice Age, a specific tongue of the glacier called the Narragansett Lobe sat directly over the bay. As it melted, it stayed in place longer than the surrounding ice, carving out the deep channels that now allow massive tankers to reach the port of Providence. Fact 32. The Fox Point Hurricane Barrier. Providence is a city built on a tidal funnel. Because the bay narrows as it moves north, storm surges are amplified. To combat this, the city built the Fox Point Hurricane Barrier, a massive geographical gate that can physically seal the city off from the Atlantic Ocean. Fact 31. The bathymetry of wind. Rhode Island is home to the first offshore wind farm in the U.S. because of its bathymetry. The ocean floor south of Block Island has a unique plateau that's shallow enough for foundations but exposed to the raw, unobstructed winds of the open Atlantic. Fact 30. The Quahog Beds. The floor of Narragansett Bay is covered in nutrient-rich silt deposited by the retreat of the glaciers. This specific soil geography is what makes Rhode Island the global capital of the Quahog. The soil of the bay is as productive as the best farmland in the Midwest. Fact 29. The Watch Hill Finger. Watch Hill is a recursive spit. It's a finger of sand created by longshore drift. The Atlantic currents carry sand from the east and deposit it in a hook shape to the west. If humans didn't intervene with jetties, Watch Hill would eventually grow so long it would touch Connecticut. Fact 28. The Kettle Ponds. Scattered throughout the South County woods are hundreds of kettle ponds. These are perfectly circular lakes formed when massive chunks of glacial ice were buried in the dirt. When the ice melted, the ground collapsed, creating punched-out holes that filled with groundwater. Fact 27. The Providence Subway Rivers. Two major rivers, the Woonasquatucket and the Moshassuck, converge in downtown Providence. For decades, they were paved over and hidden beneath the world's widest bridge. In the 1990s, the city daylighted them, restoring the natural river geography. Fact 26. The Brenton Point Wind Tunnel. The tip of Newport at Brenton Point is one of the windiest spots on the East Coast. Because there's no land between this point and the Azores in Portugal, the wind has thousands of miles of fetch to build up speed. Fact 25. The Basement Rock. Rhode Island's basement rock is mostly phyllite and schist. These are metamorphic rocks that have been folded and squeezed by the collision of continents. If you look at the rocks in Newport, you can see the stretch marks of the Earth's crust. Fact 24. Deep water channels. Narragansett Bay contains some of the deepest natural channels on the East Coast, reaching depths of over 100 feet near the Newport Bridge. This is why the U.S. Navy chose Rhode Island as a primary base. The geography allows massive ships to come right up to the shore. Fact 23. The tidal pulse. Rhode Island has a modest tidal range of about 3.5 feet. However, because the bay is so shallow in the north, that small vertical move causes a massive horizontal change, exposing miles of mudflats in a single hour. Fact 22. Ice-scoured granite. In the northern woods, you can find granite pavements, flat expanses of rock that look like they were sanded down by a machine. These were polished by the weight of 2 miles of ice moving over them during the Pleistocene. Fact 21. The Great Swamp. The Great Swamp of South Kingstown is the largest wetland in the state. Geographically, it's a glacial lake remnant. As the glaciers melted, a massive lake was trapped by the Charlestown Moraine. Eventually, the lake filled with sediment and vegetation, creating a 3,500-acre wilderness. Fact 20. The Mount Hope Rift. The Mount Hope Bridge spans a significant geological rift. The rock on the Bristol side is fundamentally different from the rock on the Portsmouth side, representing a fault line where two different pieces of the Earth's crust were welded together. Fact 19. The double tide. Due to the shape of Narragansett Bay, some areas experience a double high tide phenomenon. The water entering through the West Passage and the East Passage arrives at slightly different times, creating a prolonged peak that confuses traditional nautical charts. Fact 18. The boulder trains. Rhode Island features boulder trains, lines of massive rocks that stretch for miles. Glaciers picked up specific rock types from one location and dropped them in a straight line as they moved south, creating a breadcrumb trail of the Ice Age. Fact 17. The Atlantic Trench. Just south of the state lies the Block Canyon, a massive underwater trench. It's part of the Hudson Canyon system and serves as a highway for deep-sea nutrients and cold water currents to reach the Rhode Island shore. Fact 16. The Barrier Beach Migration. Rhode Island's southern beaches are not static. They're migrating landward as sea levels rise. Geographers have found ancient marsh peat, which only forms in quiet bays, now sitting on the open Atlantic beach, proving the island is rolling over on itself. Fact 15. The Puddingstone Foundries. The rugged coastline of Newport is composed of a unique geological formation called conglomerate, but locals know it as Puddingstone. This rock was formed roughly 300 million years ago, when fast-moving glacial rivers dumped smooth, rounded river stones into a bed of fine sand and silt. Over eons, the pressure of the Earth fused them together into a natural concrete. This stone is so incredibly durable that it has resisted the Atlantic's erosive power for millions of years. It provides the stable, immovable foundation for the famous Cliff Walk and the Gilded Age mansions that sit atop them, proving that the wealth of Newport is literally built on a foundation of prehistoric riverbeds. Fact 14. The Great Fog Boundary. Rhode Island sits at one of the most significant climatological meeting points in the North Atlantic. To the south, the warm tropical waters of the Gulf Stream sweep upward. To the north, the frigid Labrador Current pushes down. When these two massive water masses interact off the coast of Rhode Island, they create a thermal barrier. Warm, moist air is suddenly chilled by the cold coastal currents, causing the moisture to flash condense into a thick, pea soup fog. This isn't just a weather event. It's a geographical feature that can swallow the entire Narragansett Bay in minutes, turning a sunny afternoon into a sightless, gray labyrinth. Fact 13. The Salt Pond Microestuaries. Unlike the deep open waters of Narragansett Bay, the South County salt ponds are lagoonal estuaries. These ponds, such as Ninigret and Point Judith, are shallow, sun-warmed basins protected from the raw Atlantic by narrow ribbons of sand. Because they're so shallow, they have a completely different chemistry than the rest of the state. They act as thermal engines, heating up rapidly in the summer and supporting a microgeography of life, including blue crabs and rare shorebirds, that can survive in the colder, deeper bay. They're miniature oceans within the state, each with its own unique salinity and pulse. Fact 12. The unburnable coal of the Narragansett Basin. Rhode Island sits on top of a massive deposit of coal, but you'll never see a major mine here. During the Carboniferous period, the Narragansett Basin was a vast tropical swamp. Over time, tectonic forces squeezed this region with such intensity that the coal was transformed into graphitic anthracite. Geographically, this means the coal is so hard and has such a high carbon density that it's almost impossible to ignite. It's a geological irony. Rhode Island sits on a fortune of energy that's physically locked away by the very pressure that created it. Fact 11. The Point Judith Wall. Point Judith is one of the most dangerous geographical corners in the North Atlantic, where the West Passage meets the open sea. To protect shipping, the U.S. government constructed a massive 2-mile-long V-shaped breakwater made of millions of tons of granite. This man-made geography creates a harbor of refuge. By physically breaking the energy of the Atlantic swells, it creates a pocket of calm water in the middle of a high-energy coastline. It's a rare example of humans successfully imposing a new, permanent hydrological boundary on the ocean. Fact 10. The Fortress of Hope Island. In the middle of the West Passage lies Hope Island, a place where geography has created a biological fortress. Because the island is surrounded by deep, high-velocity tidal currents, it is nearly inaccessible to land predators like raccoons or foxes. This isolation has turned the island into one of the most critical rookeries on the East Coast. Thousands of herons, egrets, and ibises navigate the winds to nest here, It's a tiny rocky outcrop that serves as a vital geographical sanctuary, safe only because the water around it is so treacherous. Fact 9. The granite gates of Blackstone Gorge. On the border of Rhode Island and Massachusetts, the landscape takes a sudden, dramatic turn at the Blackstone Gorge. Here, the river has sliced through a narrow vein of ancient granite, creating vertical cliffs that rise 80 feet above the water. This is a nick point in the state's geography, a place where the river's gradient increases sharply. It feels less like the ocean state and more like the rugged mountains of New Hampshire, offering a glimpse of the hard, crystalline backbone that lies beneath the state's softer coastal soils. Fact 8. The sea level hotspot. Scientific data reveals that the waters off Rhode Island are rising significantly faster than the global average. This is due to the geographical phenomenon involving the Gulf Stream. As the current slows down, it slumps toward the coast, pushing more water into the shallow Narragansett Bay. This makes Rhode Island a frontline geography. The state is effectively a laboratory for the world, watching as the Atlantic begins to reclaim the very river valleys it flooded 10,000 years ago. Fact 7. The sunken forest of the Atlantic. If you could travel 50 miles south of the current Rhode Island shoreline, you would find the remains of an ancient world. Fishermen in the deep Atlantic often pull up prehistoric tree stumps and peat from the ocean floor. 10,000 years ago, when much of the Earth's water was locked in ice, the Rhode Island coast extended all the way to the edge of the continental shelf. These sunken forests are geographical ghosts, marking the former borders of a state that was once twice its current size. Fact 6. The tidal funnel. Narragansett Bay is shaped like a giant, tapering V. This geometry has a profound effect on the state's hydrology. As the incoming tide moves north from the Atlantic, it's squeezed into an increasingly narrow space. This funnel effect causes the water to pile up. Consequently, the high tide in Providence is often a foot or more higher than the high tide at the mouth of the bay in Newport. The very shape of the land acts as a hydraulic pump, amplifying the power of the moon. Fact 5. The end of the moraine. Watch Hill Point is more than just a scenic overlook. It's the grand terminal of the Ice Age. This point marks the exact spot where the Charlestown Moraine, the massive wall of glacial debris, meets the sea. It's the literal corner of the state, representing the collision of two different worlds: the sheltered, sandy geography of the Long Island Sound to the west, and the raw, unshielded power of the open Atlantic Ocean to the south. Fact 4. The Pawcatuck Geological Border. The border between Rhode Island and Connecticut isn't just a political line. It follows the natural path of the Pawcatuck River. Geographically, this river acts as a suture between two different types of earth. To the east in Rhode Island, the land is dominated by the Narragansett Basin sediments. To the west, in Connecticut, the land shifts into the hard crystalline rock of the Thames River highlands. The river is the thread that holds these two different geological provinces together. Fact 3. The Estuarine Archipelago. Rhode Island is unique in that it's an archipelago within an estuary. With over 30 named islands, it's one of the most densely islanded bodies of water in North America. Each island has a distinct geographical personality, from the flat, sandy plains of Patience Island to the high, windswept cliffs of Connecticut. It's a fragmented landscape where the territory is defined more by the water between the land than the land itself. Fact 2. The bathymetry of the America's Cup. For decades, Newport was the undisputed home of the America's Cup, and the reason is purely geographical. Just outside Newport Harbor lies a deep-water plateau. The bathymetry, or underwater topography, allows for depths of over 100 feet very close to the shore. This provides a stable, deep-water arena for the world's largest yachts, free from the shifting sandbars and shallow hazards that plague the rest of the Atlantic coast. It's one of the few places on Earth where ocean racing can happen within sight of the land. Fact 1. The disappearing state. The most unbelievable fact about Rhode Island geography is its inevitable return to the sea. Because Rhode Island is essentially a drowned valley filled with soft glacial debris, it's the most vulnerable state in the Union to a changing climate. A rise in sea level of just a few meters would flood the central valleys of the state, effectively turning the ocean state into a collection of isolated islands once again. The map of Rhode Island we use today is not a permanent record. It's a temporary snapshot of a landscape that the Atlantic is slowly but surely taking back. Rhode Island may fit inside larger counties, but within its borders are crashing Atlantic bluffs, drowned glacial valleys, hurricane barriers, and offshore wind farms. It's a small state with a massive story, written in salt and stone. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Rhode Island, don't stop here. Tap the video on your screen to explore the hidden worlds of Maryland or the volcanic secrets of Mississippi. Until next time, keep exploring.